New York City, home of the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, iconic musicals, and rats the size of human babies. Okay, that last one might not be true, but everyone talks about how big the rats in New York are. I hate rats. So anyways, there have been some rumors over the past few days. Once again, these are rumors, so that's no guarantee that they're true, but they're rumors. And this is an interesting topic that I do want to talk about. So we're going to talk about if this were to potentially happen, but an F1 race in New York, could it happen? Would it happen? I think it's just being super upfront, I think it's a long shot if we're being honest, but I still do want to talk about the possibility. Also talk about another couple of things. We're going to talk about the history of F1 in New York, or the lack of history of F1 in New York in terms of the actual racing, but the plans for F1 in New York have history. It's just they've never actually gotten on the streets of New York in F1, but they have been in New York before, just not New York City. And then we're going to talk about this potential, like what would actually happen. And then I'll give you my brutally honest thoughts on should this happen or should this not happen. So first, the history of F1 in New York. The first point is F1 has actually been in the state of New York before. They've never actually been in New York City. No Empire State Building in the background of an F1 race. No Statue of Liberty is kind of an island way off in the distance, so you probably wouldn't see a picture of an F1 car with the Statue of Liberty. I'm getting sidetracked here. But F1 has been in the state of New York. They've been in upstate New York at Watkins Glen International. That track now hosts NASCAR races along with some IMSA races, but they have hosted F1 races back in the 60s and the 70s, back when guys like Niki Lauda were in F1. So they do technically have a history of racing in the state of New York, just not New York City. As for New York City itself, F1 has never raced there, as I've said multiple times. But multiple times there have been races planned to be run in New York City. In the early to mid 80s, there were actually plans to potentially run a race in New York. They had everything drawn up. They had, some funding, I think. But then there were some legal issues and just some, paperwork issues, things like that. And the deal ultimately fell through and they did not race in New York City. Then the most recent one was actually about a decade ago. I think it was in 2011 that it was announced, or 2012 rather, that there was going to be a race, the Grand Prix of America, technically it would be run in New Jersey, but the pictures, the way the track would be run would have the New York skyline in the background. So this race would be run on the other side of the Hudson River in New Jersey with New York City, some of its most iconic buildings, the skyline in the background of the F1 race. Now, ultimately, the issue with this one, it was supposed to be run in 2013, then it got postponed to 2014, and then it ultimately just, as we all know, got canceled, and this was due to a lack of funding. I think Bernie Ecclestone was the primary guy who tried to facilitate both of these races, but ultimately, as I said, they both fell through, so no race in New York in the 80s or the early 2010s, but they have attempted to run in New York before. Red Bull's done some promotional stuff there. When I Googled F1 New York, like all the pictures were of some old Red Bull car in New York City. So, I guess technically an F1 car has been on the streets of New York. But seriously though, no F1 races in New York City itself or the New York City area. As I said, that race that was supposed to be in 2013, 2014, that was going to be technically run in New Jersey on the other side of the Hudson River, not on the actual Manhattan Island. Now, as for this actual rumored race, now once again, rumored, I think it's a long shot. We'll talk about my thoughts on it later in this video. Where would it be run in New York City? New York City is a big city. It's very densely populated. It has over 8 million people living in New York City. The park, or not the park, that's what we're about to talk about, the park. Manhattan Island is what everyone thinks of. You've got the Empire State Building, you got Times Square, you've got Central Park, which is what we're about to talk about. You got the World Trade Center. So there's a lot of things in New York City, a lot of iconic sites that people think of when they think of New York. And obviously New York City itself is just a huge world place. It's on water, the New York Stock Exchange. I think a lot of rich people live there, and they're super way up there, high penthouses. You see those 100-foot or 100-story buildings. Getting sidetracked. But the reason these rumors kind of took off, in a sense, is I don't know why they waited till like this week to take off, but it's because of what someone said a month ago at the first ever Las Vegas Grand Prix. Now, F1 has obviously expanded its horizons in the United States. In the past decade, it's only been, before 2022, it had only been in Austin at the U.S. Grand Prix at the Circuit of the Americas, a permanent, facility that is only run for racing, racetrack. I know they have other venues in there. They got a soccer field, they've got a concert venue. But in terms of, it's a race course. It's like a fully purposed race course. But then they've decided to add more. And this is the quote that was used, or that was said at the Las Vegas Grand Prix by the former CEO of F1, or Liberty Media. Liberty Media, of course, owns F1. This is what he had to say. His name is Chase Casey, and by the way, he still works in F1. He's an F1 non-executive chairman, so he still does stuff within F1, but he's just no longer as big of a role that he has been. He said, "This is what it should be all about. We said early on, Vegas, Miami, and New York. They're the next cities we should be in, and Vegas delivered." So, of course, in 2022, we saw the debut of the Miami Grand Prix. Basically a parking lot race. Yeah, technically it is a street circuit. I think they actually do run on a couple of streets, but it's more like a parking lot race. It's around the Hard Rock Stadium, which is where the Miami Dolphins play. It's where the Orange Bowl is played, which is one of the biggest college football bowls. I think they also do some soccer games there as well. But that's, it's a pretty big venue, and they're able to host a pretty big event, the Miami Grand Prix, in May of every year. Until 2031. The Circuit of the Americas contract is through 2026. So those two races, they've been a thing for the past, or CODA has been a thing since 2012, Miami since 2022. And then they decided to add a third U.S. race, which was the Las Vegas Grand Prix. And this is the truest street circuit in the U.S. right now. They ran on Las Vegas Boulevard, the Strip. They ran on, roads all around. There's only like a small section that's not actually on a road, and that's the paddock area. The paddock building turns like 1 through 4. But that was a big race. That was a huge event. And as I said, it was a true street circuit. They had to shut down major roads. They had to do a lot of construction. It really upset a lot of the locals who had to go to the Strip to work because it was such a hassle, such a mess. Now, if you want my honest opinion on all three of these, I thought once again, I was there, so I might be biased. I thought the first Las Vegas Grand Prix, the race itself was a success. There were some things that needed to be, fixed up. It was their first ever race there, Not everything's going to go perfectly smooth on your first race, but, obviously that Thursday was frustrating. But Saturday, the race itself was great. The racing was great. I think it has a spot on the calendar, brutally honest. Once again, I may be biased. I like Las Vegas. I like the Las Vegas Grand Prix. So I could be biased. I think Circuit of the Americas hosting the United States Grand Prix has a spot on the calendar. CODA is a great track, has had some great racing. It's the permanent facility built for F1. I think that's a great track. Keep it on the calendar. Now we go to this third race, Miami. It exists. I have not been sold on Miami yet, and there are a lot of people frustrated that there are 3 United States races. The U.S. is a big country geographically, and I understand the frustrations from the fans that are not from the U.S., whether you're from Europe, Asia, elsewhere. I understand the frustration of having 3 U.S. races, and now the fact that there are rumors that there could be a 4th is going to make your head explode. And I understand the sentiment. And honestly, if you want my brutal honest opinion, I think 2 U.S. races should be it. That is the max number of U.S. races. And what races should they be? They should be the U.S. Grand Prix in Austin and the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Obviously, the Las Vegas Grand Prix has a low sample size in terms of racing, but that one race we saw was a pretty darn good race. As for CODA, as I said, great track. So many different features about that track. And then Miami, nothing special to me, honestly, other than the fact that it's in Miami. The track itself, we haven't seen a great race yet. And once again, a small sample size, only 2 races, but the racing hasn't been great. The track itself is just a parking lot. I personally just don't see the appeal of Miami. But now to go back to the topic of this current video, which is New York. What would happen with New York? How would they fit this in the schedule? Well, one of the times, I can't remember if it was the early 2010s or the 80s, but when they ultimately wanted to do a race in New York, I think it was set for June, around the time of the Canadian Grand Prix, which is not that far from New York City in Montreal, Canada. So the plan was, because the F1 schedule is really whack, to be nice about it. The F1 schedule is whack because, like, this year, I think we went from Spain to Canada, back over to Europe to Austria. Like, a lot of jumping around when you could have simplified this a bit. Anyways, I don't make the schedule. I don't have a big brain. I don't have big money, so I don't get to make that decision. But I do want to make a video of, if I were to make the F1 calendar, because I did that for NASCAR last year and I had a lot of fun with it. So I think I should do it with F1. That off-season video idea, that'll come up in the next few weeks. But this would essentially give more purpose to coming to North America in June. The European schedule runs from May to early September, and you have that awkward moment in June where you come over to Canada. So I think they were trying to make it a little bit more purposeful, come over to the US and Canada, come over to North America, hit New York and Canada while you're over here, get 2 races out of the way, make it worth your while. Well, if this race was to be run, I'm not sure when it would be run. The U.S. races right now, we got the Miami Grand Prix in May. We've got the Circuit of the America Austin race. We have that at the end of October. And then we have kind of late November, the Las Vegas Grand Prix. So I don't know where New York would fit in. But if this were to happen, where would it be run? The article that rumored this potential race said Central Park. Now, Central Park is a big park, especially in New York City. I think it's the biggest in New York City. Actually, I'm going to say that definitively because it takes up a good chunk of the island. For those of you who want numbers, it's about 840 acres. It extends between 59th and 110th Street. It's about 2.5 miles or 4 kilometers long, or tall, long, however you want to say it. And then about the width of it is about 0.5 mile or 0.8 kilometers. So it's a big park. Obviously, they would not tear down the park and, turn it into an F1 race. But I'm assuming they're using that area because the traffic is a little bit less dense. New York City, the jokes all around are, oh, the traffic's terrible, blah, blah, blah. You might as well walk everywhere. New York drivers, all that stuff. You've heard it in movies, I'm sure. And that is ultimately my problem with this race. Is yes, it would be cool to see an F1 car in New York City. Yes, it would be cool to see, Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso driving by and having the Empire State Building in the background. Yes, that would be cool. Ultimately, though, after what we saw in Las Vegas with, locals getting upset because of the construction and how much of a hassle it was, if you do this in New York City, you're kind of trapped. Vegas is landlocked. You can find other ways to get in the city. You can find your way around things, but it's still a hassle. It's still difficult. New York City, Manhattan specifically, is an island. You cannot get around everything in New York. And that is ultimately, I think, what would shut this down, is the fact that it would be too much of a hassle, too difficult to maneuver around. Even if you did it in Central Park, even if you tried to put the majority of the access or the problems, the chaos in Central Park, you would still have to run in parts of New York City. You'd have to shut roads down, repave roads. It would be too much of a mess, and I just don't think it's going to happen, brutally honest. As I said earlier, here's my, I guess, to recap this 15, 20 minute, however long this video has been, to wrap this thing up, New York it's a fun idea in theory. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it can happen. 3 races in the U.S. is more than enough. As I said earlier, I think the U.S. should only have 2 races. I think COTA deserves a spot and Vegas deserves a spot. Once again, I could be biased. I personally, just Miami exists. It does. It has a contract through 2031. If you're going to add New York to the schedule, I don't think you can do a 4th U.S. race. I think you'd have to somehow rotate it in with the other ones. And at that point, it's just so much of a hassle. I personally would rather, and I know a lot of other F1 fans, old school F1 fans, would rather see them come back with, a classic old track that we've left. And I'd agree with them on that. We're seeing a lot more street circuits added to the F1 schedule, and some of them are fun. Singapore is a fun track. Baku has provided some great racing. Vegas provided some great racing. But we don't need every track to be a street circuit, We can build a permanent facility. We can go back to a permanent facility. Every day you get on social media and there's someone posting, what track do you want to bring back? And you go through the comments and people say they want to go back to Germany, whether it's Hockenheim, whether it's the Nürburgring. You see people saying they want to go back to Malaysia, South Korea, India. There are some places that F1 has gone in the past that have a history in F1 that have permanent facilities that, F1 could go back to. But the problem is, it's money. New York would realistically bring in more money. It would be more of a financial good thing. Is that the right way to say it? Whereas, you go back to a permanent facility and, as the tracks I just listed, and ultimately that would be the problem. But I would rather go back to some of those old tracks. The German Grand Prix hasn't been run since 2019. They haven't run in Germany since 2020. Malaysia, it's been 7 years since they've run in Malaysia. South Korea, I can't remember how long it's been. Same with India. But F1, as an American, I say thank you for the love. Thank you for the love to the US of A. But we don't need a full calendar of USA. There are more people out there that would like F1. They want to see racing themselves. So, spread the calendar out more geographically, I guess. So, in conclusion, 2 U.S. races is the most we need. New York is a little unrealistic. It's a fun idea, let's be honest, but it is a little unrealistic. It's a little crazy. Thanks for watching this video. I know I went on a lot of different directions this video, but thanks for watching it. Once again, this is a rumor, so there's nothing locked in. These rumors could be wrong. There could have been no talks about F1 going to New York, but would it happen? I'd give it 100,000 to 1 odds, honestly. And if it does happen, well, okay. But thanks again for watching this video wherever you are. Have a good morning, night, day, wherever you are. And as I said earlier in this video, I would like to if I made the F1 schedule, I would like to make that video. So that'll be an off-season idea coming to you soon. Thanks again for watching.